to another episode of Knight Rider. If you are unfamiliar with this series that we do here, Knight Rider is where we slow down, we take a lot of time, and we try to think about things a couple levels deeper. So come with me on a journey as we hang out together for a while. So I have been mulling this over recently, and a lot of interesting things happen at the decline of an empire, at the dying of an empire. And you see this throughout history, time and time again, in different places and different scenarios and different cultures. Lots of interesting things happen. And one of those interesting things that happens at the decline of an empire is ideas. People start to get different ideas because things are declining, right? Things are bad, and everybody knows they're bad. And so the natural question, of course, is why? Why is it so bad? Why did my parents have it good and I have it bad? Or why did my grandparents have it really good and I have it really bad, right? Why is it that we were once a competent, wonderful, glorious nation, place to live, people, etc., and now we're not? Very natural question to ask, right? You see this at the fall of Rome. One of the prevailing thoughts at the fall of the Roman Empire was that they were too Greek. They were adopting too many of those effeminate Greek ideas, right? You see this very clearly at in the Weimar Republic in Germany, right? After World War I ends, Germany is left absolutely wrecked, right? Just wrecked. I mean, they've lost the largest war in human history up until that point. They were blamed for the whole thing, unfairly, I would probably add. Mostly unfairly, let's say. Now, they didn't start it, for the record, right? Austria-Hungary did, which, by the way, that nation was erased from history after World War I, so I guess they paid that price. But Germany is just completely wrecked. So they've lost this war. On top of that, I mean, the Allies impose brutal reparations, I guess is the right word, on them. Money they have to pay back to the other countries, right? You got to remember, World War I didn't end like World War II. Like, Germany wasn't conquered. There was a ceasefire on November 11th at like 11 something p.m. In the 11th month, right? 11/11/11. That's how it's easy to remember. Anyways, so there was a ceasefire. That's what happened. And then they went to the negotiating table, and the terms were just awful. But Germany couldn't afford to fight anymore, so they had to agree to these just brutal, humiliating terms, right? So the nation was ruined. I mean, the monarchy was over. They had this really weird interim period, and then that guy rises to power. And again, you can see the shift of ideas, right? Well, we were the rulers of Europe. I mean, not necessarily like they ruled all of Europe, but they had produced incredible amounts of culture and engineering and ingenuity. I mean, Germany coming into World War I is, I mean, maybe not the leading nation, but certainly could vie for the spot, right, of all of Europe. And I'm not talking just about like militarily or economically. I'm talking about like an incredible amount of culture came out of Germany in the last several hundred years leading into World War I. Super fascinating if you're into all that. When you look at music, you look at art. I mean, the printing press was invented by Gutenberg, right? Gutenberg. So if that's not German for you, I don't know what is. So everything had been destroyed, and so they started to search around for ideas about how to fix this or why it was this way. And when people start to do that, thoughts go in new, sometimes unforeseen directions, right? In retrospect, you can look at Germany and be like, oh, well, we all knew that was coming, but you didn't. You didn't. And so that makes me think of our current situation. And that makes me think of the new, and I'm going to put that in air quotes, ideas that we have now. And what are the ideas that are permeating our dying culture, our dying republic now? And where do those ideas lead? And what do they mean? And what are the desires underneath those ideas that people hope will bring to fruition by potentially believing that idea, right? So I've been thinking on that. And I think one of the interesting ideas or shifts maybe in ideas is what I'm going to call new paganism. It's not really new, but it's certainly revived. It's certainly how do I want to phrase that? Different? I don't know. So here's how I would articulate this idea, right? Kind of a little bit racist, and I mean that in the terms of not of like racist like the liberals use it, like where they just call everyone racist for everything, right? And when they do that, you should simply laugh at them. That's not a word that actually carries meaning for them. It's just a word to get you to do what they want, right? They call you racist because they just don't like you and expect you to then kowtow and be like, no, I'm not a racist. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like actual, real discriminating against people because of their skin color. Like DEI, for instance, right? And so it's this new idea, and here's how I would articulate it. I've seen it on a couple different. It's very anti-Christian, a couple different places on the Twitter spheres. So it's this idea that we are here, this place in America, because we have been too nice or soft or weak. I think that's probably the word that they would use. I'm trying to steel man it as best I can. I'm trying to understand it as best I can. But we've gotten to this place, the decline of a nation, because we're too weak or soft or pathetic or long-housed, effeminized, right? And so, because we no longer have any strength or will, we are a nation overrun, right? And you can, and the reason these ideas take root or have seductive power is because they address a legitimate problem. And if you look at our current dying empire, it addresses a legitimate problem. What's the problem? Well, we have tens of millions of illegal immigrants. That's a huge, massive, nation-ending problem. We have no more social cohesion, right? Like if you were to poll 10 people in 10 different cities across America about anything, good luck getting the same answer, right? Like let's just say poll 100 people. 100 people across America. America's like 325 million people-ish, give or take. I could be wrong on that. You might need to fact check me on the numbers, but I'm close, okay? If you were to poll those 100 people about anything, Do you think you'd get the same answer? I mean, of course you don't, right? You don't think, oh yeah, well, we'd all agree that America first. Like no one would say that, right? Well, a couple people would, a couple people wouldn't, right? A couple people would talk about how we need to let more illegal immigrants in, and that's the American thing to do. Um, the answers would be all over the map, right? So these again the ideas they recognize a legitimate problem, and again they take root also because there are other people out there who just deny the problem, right? If you look at like modern leftism, I would say it denies the problem. It's why it's going to be a dying idea, because it won't even acknowledge the fact that there is something wrong. It won't even acknowledge that there is a problem, right? Instead, it'll say no, 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 right? You see this in the media propaganda stuff all the time, right? Oh no, you don't understand. There aren't actually illegal immigrants from this place here in this town. That's not. They're not actually doing the thing, right? Like the the Venezuelan gangs taking over. I wanted to say Springfield, but that's not right. But somewhere in Colorado, right? You'll see all the articles running about how, oh, well, that's not actually happening. They're not actually taking over apartment complexes and extracting taxes from people. It's not actually happening. Or the Haitian immigrants eating cats thing recently, right? A couple weeks ago. You see lots of people saying, "Well, that's not actually happening, and you don't understand, and you're a racist," and on and on we go, right? But at some point, at somewhere, people in general understand there's a legitimate issue and problem. And so, again, the way that I'm going to call it new paganism for the rest of this chat. I don't know if that's perfectly accurate, but it's the best I got right now, so I'm going to go with it. The new paganism people are going to say, well, that's a problem, right? And again, if you are paying the barest bit of attention, you have to say, well, yeah, actually, that's concerning, right? Um, that's concerning. And so they go from, well, look, we don't have social cohesion. We don't have strength. We're letting criminals run rampant, right? We're not punishing evil anymore, and we just let it run rampant, and that's a problem. And I would say, yep, those are problems. I would agree. So this new paganism idea reaches back to a kind of a Viking-like mentality, and says something to the effect of what we need is to return with the V, right? We need to, excuse me, some of you will get that. Some of you won't, and that's okay. We need to return to this Viking era of thought. And it's a system based on vengeance, right? You have wronged me, so I'm going to absolutely wreck you so that you can never wrong me again, right? Either through the power of the state or not, doesn't matter. And this idea of racial fidelity, or ethnic fidelity, shall we say. Like a lot of these people I would put in this camp, I've seen on Twitter saying that the problem is everyone's not white anymore, right? And if everyone was white, then we wouldn't have these problems. And they'll point to IQ scores across race, and they'll point to who's committing crimes based on racial disparities, right? And they'll point to a bunch of different ethnic differences and say, well, we just need to return to that European, Northern European, white, Anglo-Saxon, whatever. Which, by the way, Anglo-Saxon is funny because you got to remember those are two different people groups, the Anglos and the Saxons. And they both settled in England, and then they, which at the time, by the way, they fought and killed each other a lot, the Anglos and the Saxons. And they had also fought and killed the other white people in England prior. They were Germanic invading peoples that came into England, right? England has had multiple different people groups wiped out from it, multiple different times. The Picts, if you go all the way back to when the Romans first showed up, they ruled the roost, and then they eventually became the Scottish because they got kind of pushed out. They were one of the last tribes the Romans never conquered. And there was another people group, the Iceni, I think is who I'm trying to think of, in England, that were eradicated, right, by the Romans. So all that to say, you have different white groups killing each other throughout history. That's nothing new. And we're called, I don't know if I'm technically Anglo-Saxon, to be honest. We just use that as a catch-all term for white people, but that's not exactly what that means. Anyway, they would say that, look, we have all these, we need to go back to the ethnic fidelity. That's the term I'm going to use, right? And they would say, I'm not a new pagan. I just think it's fascinating, interesting, because I believe in Jesus. That's why I'm not a new pagan. But we'll get there. Ethnic fidelity is one of the markers. This strength, and I think what's fascinating is when they say, "Look, we're weak now," and I would say, "Yep, that's true." And the way we get strength is to go back to, if we have the ethnic fidelity, then we'll have cultural cohesion. Okay, then we'll have, then we won't have this diverse mess of cultural disparity, shall we say, right, where everyone's on a different page about everything all the time. And the way we get the strength is to go back to the vengeance thing. We can't be weak. And Christianity would be a weak worldview because it's a worldview that teaches you to love your enemy. And they would say, that's what got us here. Right? They would say, well, look, your weak, effeminized religion of loving your enemy and turning the other cheek, which I don't think they know what that means, but that's a different episode. That is what placed us in this problem. So the solution is to reject that. Oh, that's my alarm. Sorry, I get time to wake up. To reject that and to move into a go all the way back to like 800 AD or 700 AD, and fairly random time to be picked out, in my opinion, and embrace this pagan vengeance, strength, will to rule, will to crush the enemy culture, because then that will secure our culture, that will secure our nation, that will secure our tribe. I don't think they necessarily mean that ethnically in that instance, but they mean like our city, our country, our people, our place. And that's the solution. That's the solution. And I think there's some truth in it, in the sense of who doesn't want a nation that's cohesive? I mean, that's the point of it. It's partly the point of a nation, right? We're on the same page about stuff. We believe in our nation. There's a degree of healthy nationalism, right? Yeah, I mean, I love living here and I really enjoy it, and of course we need to take care of our own business before we start taking care of other people's business. And yeah, I mean, right? Like, if you don't have that, you don't have a nation. I don't know what you have, but it's not even saying something like that. People can be like, oh, well, that's racist and that's whatever. And I'm like, no, that's just baseline. Like, I prefer my family above other families, right? I'm going to take care of my wife and my kids before I take care of your wife and your kids. And that's just like basic good husbanding, right? I would think so. I hope you're enjoying my fancy little pumpkin mug here. So I think there's the goals of what they want, of what they think those ideas will affect, I think are right. It's cultural cohesion, a nation that isn't weak and just overrun by its enemies at every turn, right? A nation that isn't being sold out by its leaders so that they can put a couple more million in the bank as this whole thing falls apart, right? Of course, those are bad problems, right? They want to get rid of those problems, and they want to go to a, I don't know if I'll go to a time where we don't have those problems and we have strong social cohesion and we're all on the same page. So what they want, I would agree. The problem is they identify it. I would agree. I would not agree on the solution. Of course I would not agree, right? Because first and foremost, I'm a Jesus guy. I have been for a long time, thank God. Not my whole life, because God saved me when I was 18. Different story, different show. But we have to say, okay, what is true and what is not true, right? And I think one of the things that we have to rest on is God is real. Oh man, can't say that. Yeah, so God is real. And therefore, he has dictated ways for us to live. Now, whether or not you believe in God is irrelevant in the sense that he has dictated for certain things to be how they should be. And therefore, if you follow those things, your life will go better because God has set rules in the universe. Whether or not you believe in him, whether or not you're going to repent and know Jesus, for the purposes of this conversation, is irrelevant. Very relevant for eternity and, not going to hell and not being under God's wrath because you're evil. Different topic. Repent, believe in Jesus. But what is relevant is, what are the rules that God has put in place for the world? And why is it, crazy random happenstance, that when you break those rules, things are harder? Right? So, for example, okay, in the Old Testament, and I would argue now, the punishment for murder was the death penalty. If you killed someone, death penalty. Rape also carried the death penalty, right? If you committed rape, death penalty. Okay, that was the punishment for the crime. And and I don't know all the history on this one, so I'm probably going to fumble this a little bit. I apologize. Somewhere in like the late 1800s, maybe 1880s, 1890s, whatever, you start to see the development of the prison industrial complex, right? And initially, it was a progressive movement by people, progressive leaning Christians, or at least people who claim to be, that wanted to help people. Right? Well, they're criminals and they did a bad thing, yeah, but, we can fix them. Very effeminized, kind of long-housed idea, right? We can repair these people, so we shouldn't kill them, execute them for their crimes. We should X, Y, and Z to reform them. And you see how that's played out over the last couple hundred years, right? Excuse me. Well, like 150 years. Still early in the morning for me. I apologize. Can't do math. You see how that's played out. Not well is the answer, right? Because what happens? Well, we arrest people for heinous crimes like murder, cold-blooded murder. I'm not talking about self-defense. I'm not talking about killing. I'm talking about murder. The intentional taking of a life of another without proper cause. Murder. Okay? We take murders and we say, well, you ended someone's existence on this planet, but, and that's where the problem comes in, but, we can let's put you in a box for 10 years and you'll come out and you'll be better. You'll reacclimate to society. So someone else loses their life forever. and you just have to wait around for 10 years or maybe 20, right? Is that justice? I saw recently that the penitentiary in my state, within 9 years, 80% of the people who committed crimes in that penitentiary are back in it. 80%. And I got that information from a Democrat politician who was like, "This is why we need more programs." And I thought, nope, I don't think that's making the case that you're thinking it's making. I don't think that's the problem. I don't think more programs is going to help these people reacclimate. And people say, "Oh, well, the American justice system is built on punitive punishment, and that's the problem. We need to be more like Europe, where they rehabilitate, etc., etc." So I'm going down this rabbit hole to just show one case in point, right? This is a place where I would say we have erred from our original founding principles. And by that I mean a nation built on what does God say about the world and how therefore should we live. If you're like, "Oh, it's not a Christian nation," I'm sorry, do more history. We don't have time to go into that right now. But this is a place where we have strayed from our founding principles, a biblical principle of punishment for murder is death penalty. Moving on. Doesn't mean that I don't want them to repent and believe in Jesus. It just means that you have made a decision that you should be removed from society for, and I'm not the one saying that. God is. So because we've strayed from that, we've done two things. One, we've created the problem. And this is just, again, one micro example. I'm not saying if we just started enforcing more capital punishment would fix all our problems, because it wouldn't. We have multi-layers of problems. But taking this one little microcosm, if we started enforcing capital punishment the way God says we should over stuff, okay? Because we've stopped doing that, we've left open two problems. The first one is we've increased anarchy in our society, right? You saw this a lot in the 80s, right? Crime was through the roof until they got tough on crime, right? They started arresting people. Imagine that. So we've left open this gap for anarchy and chaos and problems to grow, right? Because we're not removing the people who are causing the problems. We're just putting them in the penalty box and then letting them play again, thinking that somehow they've changed their behavior, right? And some people do, by the way. But that's certainly not the rule by any stretch of the imagination. So, where are they going with this? Right. Okay, sorry. Apologize. Still waking up here. So, we've left it open for anarchy. The other thing we do then is, because we've created the problem, we leave it open for the new pagan ideas, right? Well, they say, your weak, effeminized Christianity got us here. Incorrect. Actually, straying from the Christianity is what got us here, right? But your weak, effeminized Christianity got us here. So therefore, we need to go in this new direction. And then you get the new paganism, and you get the strong. We need to be strong, and we need to have the will, right? And the really pro-Nietzsche and the Superman, the Ubermensch kind of ideas start to come in. And what's funny is you can agree with them on certain principles, right? Like, well, we need to be a strong country. I would say, yeah, of course, right? Then they would say, and that's why we need to get rid of that weak Jesus character. And I'd say, oh, my friend, we have strayed off the path. So, and this is just one of the different ideas that's going to be out there. But I find this shift extremely interesting, and I think that it means a couple things. One, I think that people need to actually be educated on what Christianity is, what it says about the world, what it means, what does God require? Because I think that often the requirements of God are much harder, much more willed, much more full of strength than most people are comfortable with, right? Ooh, what do you mean we should just execute murderers? Like, that's a little harsh, isn't it? And it's like, well, they did kill someone, so yeah, there's that. Um, but I think God is much harder than you give him credit for. Two, I think that because again we've left that open, people don't understand what Christianity is. There needs to be a calling back to the founding principles, understanding that we haven't abandoned our principles, or excuse me, our principles aren't what got us here. Abandoning our principles are what got us here, right? We didn't get here because we did the thing we set out to do. We got here because we didn't do the thing that we set out to do. So what we need is not new ideas or new directions or new paganisms, right? What we need is to return with the V to the original founding principles of what does God say about the universe? What does he demand of people? What are the rules that he set up? And if we obey them, things will go better for us on a practical basis, not an ultimate salvation basis. Slightly different topic. Repent and believe in Jesus. We'll do another talk about that sometime. Um, but just basic laws, right? God put out the law to punish evil. That's a good thing, punishing evil, right? God set up secure nations and private property and borders. Like these things are good and healthy and right. And if we do them, then you can live in a nation that's much more cohesive, right? Having immigration isn't necessarily bad, but assimilation is very important, right? If people are going to come and live in your country and not assimilate, well, now you're creating dis, disparate cultures, despairing cultures, cultural disparity. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say there, but you no longer have a unifying culture in a nation. And in a place as big as America, America is the third largest nation in the world by population or by land size. Either way, it's massive. You have to understand that. It's not a small country like Luxembourg, right? I don't know how many people live in Luxembourg. Luxembourg's very small. Some of you are like, what's Luxembourg? Very small country in Europe. But let's just take France, okay? Uh, Maybe a bad example because they have a huge illegal immigration problem. But if you just look at France or England, again, same thing, huge illegal immigration problem. But before those places had that, super small countries, right? 25, 30, 50 million people. Drop in the bucket. Like nothing compared to the United States, right? Again, we're sitting at currently like 325. Population of France is, I don't know, what's the population of France? Let's see here. We're going to look this up right now. Current population of France is 68.4 million. Okay, that's currently. That's right now. So, again, you roll back the clock to like 1950. Man, that's like nothing. That's like nothing. Especially compared to, again, where we would be at the same time, right? They maybe like a tenth of our population ish. I don't know. Ken, we could look that up. But you have to understand that because America is so big, because it's so incredibly massive, you're already going to have cultural disparity issues. So we need to have a cohesive culture. That's important. How do you do that? Well, I would say we have to assimilate to something. Right? What are we assimilating to? Currently, we're being taught to assimilate to communism. That's a problem. That'll pay out later. We've only seen that happen in multiple other countries like China. China, comparable country size at the time, right? When communism came through and fully took over there, up to 100 million people died, give or take. The thing is, no one really knows how many millions of people died because they starved to death. They weren't counted. That couldn't happen here. I would beg to differ. Um, so we need to have a cohesive, strong-willed culture. The question is not, is that what we need? In my mind, the question is, well, how do we get there? And I would argue, moving back, moving forward, however you want to phrase it, to some kind of neo-paganism, desperate search for some kind of foundation of strength and will and honor and valor. That ain't it, my bros. I don't think that will get you what you want. I've read the history of those places that have that. And the Vikings, great example, are famous for blood feuds lasting generations, right? No one really knows why we're killing each other anymore. We just are, because they're the Hatfields and we're the McCoys, and, to hell with them, right? That's not social cohesion either. So I think as you're encountering these new ideas, and I new again in semi-quotes here, but these ideas of where should we go now as a nation, what are the principles and the foundations that we need to build on to fix this mess? You should ask yourself, what are they building on? What are they saying? Where does that lead? Why do they want that? And what are they saying that is true? And what are they saying that adds to that truth that isn't quite going to get us where we need to go? I hope that's helpful. I hope that gives you something to think about. Do brave deeds. And enjoy.